Hey guys, welcome to Creative Ace. Today we're going to be talking about photo transfers and tracing and transferring techniques, but we're also going to be doing it with a theme. And part of why I'm making this video is because for the next 7 weeks, I'm going to be doing a series of online open studio workshops with Art Fix Nipissing that is going to be discussing a lot of transfer techniques, both analog and digital, and kind of like exploring some of these ideas. Transferring is just a really great technique to be able to apply to your artwork, especially if you don't have confidence in drawing, but you have like lots of ideas. It's been something that's really empowered me as an artist to get sketches of ideas down that would have been far too complicated for me to just kind of like doodle onto paper without references. And even with references, it would have taken me like a long time to develop some of these ideas. So today, we're going to be doing some transfers with the theme of women's rights, and that's in light of some historical content that we're going to be covering this week, and also in light of the fact that it's going to have been about 100 years, give or take, that women have had the right to vote federally in Canada, and I think that that's something that we should maybe take a moment and reflect on, which is to say that progress is fairly recent and that we can always be making progress, and that we should value the rights that we have and empower others to gain rights if you see injustices in the world. So today we're going to be looking at, actually I'm going to provide a really brief historical introduction to the history of suffrage in Canada, because I think that women's rights is really closely related to minorities and marginalized groups in general, and so understanding that it's not only women's rights that we were fighting for, and that it wasn't just a homogenous group of people who were looking for equality, kind of allows us to understand not only the importance of women's rights, but the importance of equality in general. All of this information can be found on the Canadian Encyclopedia. There's obviously a bunch of resources, but this was just a resource that was like readily accessible and has a good foundation for historical content. It says, quote, "During World War I, women replaced men who had joined the army services, but the labor shortage was not severe enough to warrant their large-scale employment. Although women did men's jobs, they did not receive men's wages. At the end of the war, married women employed by the government were legislated out of it. So by 1921, 65% of all women workers were in clerical, domestic service, and professional, mainly teaching and nursing, occupations. In the early part of the 20th century, women's fight for equality focused on political rights and was characterized by the suffrage movement. The right to the federal vote was finally won in 1918, and by 1922, women had won the right to vote in all provinces except Quebec, where the struggle continued until 1940. In 1929, women were recognized as quote-unquote persons eligible to hold a seat in the Canadian Senate. And so there's a lot more information on this historical content that can be explored, but I just wanted to give a really brief introduction to women's rights and to specifically suffrage, because if you look at that timeline, most women did not gain suffrage at the federal level until 1918, and between 1916 and 1940 at the provincial level through the Wartime Elections Act, which granted the federal franchise to the female relatives of men in the military. So that meant Army or Navy, active or retired. Black people were enslaved in Canada from 1600 to 1834, when the abolition of slavery received royal assent in the United Kingdom and was extended to us as a British colony. Black men had the right to vote provided they were naturalized subjects and owned taxable property. Until 1920, most colonies or provinces required eligible voters to own property or to have a taxable net worth, a practice that excluded poor people, the working class, and many racialized minorities. Black women had even less status than black men, and that was true for all races in Canada at that time. Asian people gained the right to vote after World War II around 1949 with the repeal to the Dominion Elections Act. And Indigenous people did not gain the right to vote until 1960, when a repeal to the Canadian Elections Act allowed status Indians the right to vote that coincided with the Canadian Bill of Rights. With residential schools and the 60s Scoop still ongoing, the last school would not be closed until 1996, demonstrating the ways in which equality was continuously undermined in spite of the progress made politically. The racial discriminations and discriminations against gender still continued and still continue today, but though to much, much better degrees. We've made a lot of progress and improvement in terms of equality over the last century. But it is important to remember that the last century has been trying, and that there has been lots of struggle from a variety of different groups to be able to achieve the level of equality that we have today. So today I'm going to be transferring images. I think I'm going to design them for canvas, but these could also be designed, like when you're transferring images, when you're designing images, it's really important to keep in mind what you're going to be transferring it onto. So if it's a 12 by 12 square canvas, or if it's a skateboard, it's going to be like long and thin kind of thing. You got to think about your dimensions beforehand. And a lot of the time we're going to be working on paper or tracing and transferring onto paper. And then you can kind of like, you can finalize your design on the rough part and then transfer it onto whatever surface that you're working on. So I might do two designs. I might do one for a skateboard and one for a canvas, but I think I'm going to start with the one for the canvas, and then if I'm feeling adventurous, then I'll do I can rework this to fit for a skateboard as well. And so that might require two different transfers. So if I know that, for example, my skateboard is 10 inches across, whereas my canvas might be 12 inches across, I might have to make two different scales on my computer screen. I might make two different tracings to be able to transfer onto different surfaces. So what we're going to be working with today is tracing paper. So tracing paper is going to be one of your best friends, and we're going to be using painter's tape and taping our tracing paper to our computer screen. And then we're going to be using carbon, sorry, I got stuff on here. We're going to be using carbon transfer paper, which is something that you can pick up at Staples, and it used to be made for making copies of receipts back in the day, but now it's just a really great tool that we can pick up as artists. So we'll be doing this. This was a design that I was transferring onto something, and as you can see, I've taped my design to my carbon transfer paper, which can then be taped onto a surface, and then you just trace it, and it'll translate that design to whatever degree that you trace details onto the surface. Mind you, you have to keep in mind with carbon transfer paper that you can only, like, it's not perfect in the transfer. So if you're transferring onto smooth wood, you might get a much cleaner line than if you're transferring onto like canvas, which has kind of a rougher surface even when it's gessoed. So keep in mind that when you're transferring, just transfer big general details. So for this design as an example, I would transfer all of the big circles in the middle, and then I would probably fill in the smaller circles from there, just freehand, because they're small enough that it's not going to be a big deal if the circle's not perfectly perfect. So anyways, you're going to see, I'm going to do a time lapse so you can kind of see the process. You're probably not going to see much of me, but I hope that you enjoy it. I think transferring is a really fantastic skill to have as an artist in your back pocket, regardless of how you use it. I tend to use it for sketches, and mind you, because once you start painting it and drawing it and adding your own line work, I think that like your hand comes through and kind of dominates the stylistic aspect of art, and so I don't feel like tracing and transferring should be seen as like a cheat. I think that it's a tool, the same as photography, the same as any other type of photographic transfer technique, and it should be utilized to the best degree possible. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So the images that I'm going to be working with are these women's rights images, and I think this text that says empowered women empower women really resonated with me, because the women that I've known in my life that have empowered me have been empowered, and it's been really nice to have people around you, women around you, lifting you up instead of being petty and jealous, which is something that I feel is characteristic maybe of high school and insecurity, and not really recognizing the power that we have together to be able to help and work and build and create and achieve great things together. So I'm very much looking forward to kind of transferring this. I think we're going to be doing some sponging techniques, so I'll post, maybe I'll make a video at the end of the finished result. But regardless, once you have your image transferred onto the canvas, onto your skateboard, onto whatever surface that you're going to be working on, then the sky's the limit in terms of color. You could use coloring pencils and markers and paints and inks and tape and collage and whatever you feel inclined to be working with. So I think that the transfer is just a really fantastic tool to be using to get ideas from one medium to another. And so, like I said, the Empowered Women Empower Women really spoke to me as a message for women's rights, because I feel that has been like a huge role in my life of women around me lifting me up.